Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Chu, Associate Director of the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to Unspoken Rules from Mutters to Mutters, Inspiring Journeys of Physics Alums. Now, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Jeanette Martinez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeanette Martinez from the Office of Career Services, and we are excited today to have David Liao, class of 2005, Tessa Kohl, class of 2014, and Paul SanGiorgio from class 2001, who will talk to us about their experience as working professionals with a physics background. I will be moderating the panel today. We will take questions at the end of the event, but please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to get through as many as we can. So as introductions, can our panelists share their name, major, while at MUD, and also their current profession? Tessa, can you start us off?
All right. Yeah. So my name is Tessa Kohl at Mud. My last name was Adair. I actually married a fellow Mudder, but that's a whole other story. um, let's see. My major at Mud was physics, as you know. What did you ask? I've already forgotten the other questions you asked.
No worries. So your major at MUD, what your current profession is, and anything else you'd like to share.
Cool. Okay. My current profession is product management, so I work as a product manager in the software space.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Paul, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Paul SanGiorgio. I was a math and physics major at MUD in 2001. And my current profession is I'm a systems engineer at Illumina, the leading gene sequencing company.
Awesome. David.
Hello, my name is David and the last name is pronounced Liao. And I was a physics major graduating in 2005, just a physics major, no other major. And I am a private tutor for physics and math here in New Jersey, and also the director of communications at Farplay, which is a company, a startup company that makes software for making music on the internet in real time.
All awesome jobs and journeys. David, it sounds like you're gonna like start us off on some like DJ music or anything like that with those lights in the background. So awesome. Alrighty, so we will start with David here. So can you describe your journey from graduation to your current role? What were pivotal moments that led you to where you are today? And then anyone after him.
Sure. So I went to Princeton for a PhD in physics, and I joined Professor Bob Austin's group in biological physics. As I was getting close to graduating, his group started an interdisciplinary research center as part of the National Cancer Institute's Physical Sciences Oncology Centers Network, which is a really expensive way to say that we were looking at ways to use physics and math reasoning to study cancer biology. One of the groups in our center was headed by Thea Tilsty at the University of California, San Francisco. And we found that she and I really liked working together. So then after I got my PhD, I went over there to be a postdoc in her lab for a little while. And then I found out that it's an interdisciplinary group, so you have to talk to people who are physics E and also people who are not so physics E. And that means using animations, using graphics, and carefully using English. And I found I really liked that. So after the postdocship, I came back here to New Jersey, and that's why I'm a private physics and math tutor here now. New Jersey is a bedroom community for a lot of families who have jobs in finance, like in Manhattan, or who have jobs in pharmaceuticals. So it's a great place to be a tutor. That came out in a way that didn't sound very nice, but yes, it's a good place to be a tutor if you want to do that. And then for the other part of the career, music has been a very important part of my life for a long time. I was in choirs when I was at Harvey Mudd. And during the stay at home portion of the pandemic, I worked with members of the New Jersey Gay Men's Chorus here to continue rehearsing in real time using low latency software called SoundJack, and there's actually a Mud Talks video about this that you can watch that was recorded by Harvey College. And as I learned more about this technology, I found out about the startup company called FarPlay, and I approached them with interest, and now that's how I ended up being their director of communications. So I get 2 careers, yay.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Tessa, can you go next?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'll go over like a few sort of pivotal moments. So I'd say the first big moment was when I was approaching my senior year at Mud as a physics major, and I started to sort of go through the motions of like thinking about what grad school I would apply to and things like that. And then I sort of woke up one day and decided that I realized that I didn't want to go to grad school, and that was a pretty good reason to not go to grad school. um, and so that was like a huge relief off my shoulders. I remember having to be like, okay, I got to do all this stuff, and then realizing like, wait a second, I forgot to ask whether I want to do ask myself whether I want to do this. So I'm really really glad that I asked myself that question and sort of woke up before I got like way far into the process. And so having decided like as a senior, okay, I don't know what I do want to do, but I know I don't want to do any more school. Pretty burnt out. And so I decided to sort of apply to entry-level jobs in industry. I ended up as a QA for a software company that actually has pretty close ties to Mud. It's called Laserfish. So yeah, you probably, especially in the career services side, you probably heard of them. Started as a QA there, eventually moved into a more like project manager, then product owner, then product manager role. Really loved that. Got to sort of create my own role as the company grew, learned a ton, found out that my brain really likes the office job schedule way more than school. And so I was like, okay, I'm never going back to school. And I still stand by that. I'm very happy with my decision. Unfortunately, I can't go into too many details on this, but unfortunately, I got let go from that job. Total surprise for me. About a year ago, and it was like right after a major surgery, and it was really really a big wake up call for me. Did a lot of soul searching. So that was really unfortunate. um but I sort of, you know pulled it together and ended up getting a job through a contact of somebody who I'd worked with previously at Laserfish, who is now at Epson, which is the like Japanese-based printer company. Their U.S. headquarters is in Los Alamitos. I'm based in Long Beach, so it was really close by. It worked out really well, and I'm really excited. I was really excited about that role because I get to basically be this. I describe my job to people as teaching the hardware guys how to do software, which is really fun and also really challenging, and it's really entertaining when I have all these conversations where they go, so wait, this is a virtual product? But wait, so what do we put on the box? There's just it's a whole new way of thinking for them, and I'm learning a ton. So that's exciting, and that's where I am now.
That's awesome, Tessa. Paul, last but not least, Paul.
Hi. So, I left Mud. I went, I was pretty confident when I was at Mud that I wanted to be a professor. It was something that I thought I'd wanted for a really long time. I went to graduate school in physics, got my PhD. I did a couple of postdocs, which were fun because I got to, I did one in Switzerland, which was really exciting to live in a different country. Switzerland's amazing. Everyone should live there. And, I was on my second postdoc, and my career options were not looking great at that point in time. I happened to get married, and I kind of needed to get a real job, and I was not really having any success in academic job search. And so I ended up working for Agilent, large electronics company, actually, and scientific apparatus. Doing research for Agilent, which was, it's a neat place to work. A lot of mudders there. It was an enjoyable experience, but it wasn't really exactly what I was, looking for. I felt like Very fortunately, I got laid off at Agilent along with a lot of other people, which I think you might hear is kind of a common career move that happens to us. When I was laid off, one of the older people at the company said, the first time you get laid off is pretty hard. He says, after that, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. So far, I haven't tested that out for a second time, but at any rate, I got laid off. I had to do some soul searching about what I wanted to do, what I wanted to work for, and I kind of lucked into a position with a small startup in the Bay Area that was doing gene sequencing. The company wasn't the best company. It was a startup. It had some kind of bad startup culture, but I met a lot of people there who were connected to other companies, and I learned a lot about the field. And I really got into what was called a systems engineering role. And I'd never really heard of systems engineering. I had no idea what systems engineers did. I certainly didn't learn anything about systems engineering from the introduction of systems engineering at MUD. And I was able to kind of parlay it into a better job at a better company at Alumni. And I've been there now for a little bit over 8 years and working in systems engineering, which, it's just a fascinating place and something that I think is really a great fit for people with a physics background, because it's a lot of using your diverse skill set and interacting with a lot of different people in different areas. I work with software, hardware, consumables, fluidics, optics, precision motion, firmware, packaging, marketing, pretty much everyone that touches any part of the instrument, I have some contact with them, and it's a new adventure every day. So.
Oh, wow. You all have amazing jobs and these amazing journeys. And so I know you touched a little bit on like, oh, I had a friend or a prior coworker. So to help our current students and other alumni or students that are looking to transition or thinking of something like that, how has networking and building relationships played a role in your career? Whether you build these relationships while you were at work, or whether you built them at MUD and then you came back to them, or whether you built them virtually. How have you expanded on your network? Can David go first?
Okay. So for getting into the PhD program at Princeton, like part of the network is not just this other classmates you have, but your professors. And that's helpful both for the like letters of recommendation, that kind of stuff. It's also very helpful for someone like me who did not know what he was doing at the end of undergrad. And one day I walked into Professor Townsend's office at the time, and I just told him, it was December, uh, senior year. I didn't write out my grad applications yet. Where should I apply? And then Professor Saida and Professor Townsend immediately just say, apply everywhere, figure it out later. And then they took a breath, and one of them just said, oh, wait, is there anywhere you don't want to go to? And then I said, I don't want to go somewhere where like the people are really depressed that they're doing what they're doing. And then they both immediately just said, don't apply to MIT, don't apply to MIT. So I didn't apply to MIT. And then the network also, I mean, indirectly, it's like the credentials, right? I've not really had to ask them to write a recommendation letter for me to tutor with someone, because it's just in the resume, but it's still really helpful to have that in the resume. And it's also helpful to have to know people from MUD who are also physics tutors like I am. So when a parent asks, can you recommend someone to teach X, Y, or Z? I can say, I'll go ask my friends, and that helps me sound like a little bit more substantial and respectable. One more thing that's nice for the network, this is actually related to the music stuff. So one of the places where I learned a bit about low latency audio was actually by meeting up with a group of Harvey Mudd alumni from, I think their class of 1994 or something like that. And we got together on Jamulus. One of them's in Texas, some of them are in California, things like that. And we actually did a Christmas informal unofficial Christmas session once as an unofficial Harvey Mudd alumni event. So that was also extremely helpful for actually learning how some of this software works. And I use that expertise nowadays in my job as director of communications.
Thank you, David. Paul, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, like, the networking and connections and nepotism and stuff, like use these shamelessly. Like this is how you get jobs in this world. It's sad but true. And Mud is a great place to make connections, not like David just mentioned. I mean, getting connections to grad school, if that's something you want, but, getting connections to industry, your friends, people that people you used to work with. These are the people who, first off, are going to give you the best insight into what it's actually like at a certain place. But secondly, they're going to be the people who open the door that gets you through into that, application process. I mean, I think almost every job search I've ever done has been kind of aided by some connection somewhere, that there's an alum somewhere or somebody that knew somebody who knew somebody. And these are one of the great things about going to Mud is that you start to make these connections with professors and with other students that are going to last you for a lifetime.
Yeah, I think so, Paul. They last for a lifetime because there's, students that we haven't seen in like 4 or 5 years, and they'll say like, "Hey, do you know this person and that person?" So I think it's very much true that it's for a lifetime. Tessa.
Yeah, so I definitely, as I mentioned, like my current role was just something that somebody actually reached out to me who said, "Hey, this was a user experience designer working on this team and saying, "Hey, I I really want someone else who knows software and this role just opened up. And I heard you lost your job. Like, why don't you apply?" And that was really amazing. And it's funny, like this is someone who I wasn't even that close to when we worked together, but now we're sort of on the same page, and um, it really helped me out. And yeah, I would echo what Paul said. Like, it's super messed up that this is the case, but like applying to a job without a referral or a connection like just doesn't work in my experience, especially right now when like people are just getting laid off left and right, and it's kind of a bloodbath in the industry, to be frank, at least from what I see on the software side. Um, that's been my experience, and this last like year or so has been a time when like everybody's sort of coming together. Like I have so many group chats of people who have been also laid off, have been laid off, from Laserfish, or who are just people that I've connected with who are struggling at other roles, who there's been this big like moment of communities coming together and helping each other find roles and also just stay in touch. The other thing I'll say is like I think a lot of people feel really icky about networking as a concept because it feels really gross and weird just as a term. And I think this is really a common sentiment. Um, it's really just making friends. I don't like to think of it as networking, but I mean it is, right? Like it doesn't matter what terminology you use. My experience is just it's been just making friends and just connecting and empathizing with the people that I work with and showing that I care about them. And if they're having a hard time one day and that they're a coworker, like of course I'm gonna, reach out and empathize. And like the thing about being in the adult world outside of school is that even friendships that have nothing to do with that you would never categorize as networking also take work. Like friendships take a lot of work the older you get, and so like my experience is like it doesn't feel weird anymore because even when I'm just hanging out with a friend, I have to be like, "Hello, here's my availability," right? Like that's just like how things work. I think a lot of the time when you're not like on a campus or in a school. So it stopped feeling really weird because that's just sort of the way that I communicate with people who I'm just hanging out with, and the people that I'm like quote unquote networking with has like kind of merged, and it just feels really natural at this point.
Well, that's always good. I know that some of our mutters are like, well, how do I send them a LinkedIn message? And then sometimes LinkedIn will say you only have 300 characters. And so that's like 2 sentences. And so you want to make sure that it's nice and concise, but then you don't want to say too much or say too little. So
I
yeah.
would say every LinkedIn thing I've ever received and that I've ever sent has been overly formal, and it's very much the experience of the stereotype of like you agonize over an email to a professor and then they send back like yes, right, with no context, or like sure, or whatever, right? Like that's I think how the dynamic works, and it's like it's normal because there's like a power dynamic there. But like if somebody sends me a LinkedIn request that's like, oh my God, like I'm looking at this company or like I'm looking at this role. Can you please tell me whatever? I'm just like, yeah, okay. Calendly link, done, right? Like it's usually pretty flattering. So I think people overthink it. I mean, obviously I wouldn't recommend if somebody be like super blasé about it, but I think everybody overthinks it, and it's pretty chill. And literally the worst thing that can happen is they don't respond, and that's fine.
Exactly. Or they say no, and that's it. You move on, go to the
Yeah.
next one. Yeah. Thank you so much, all of you. So I'm going to ask another question, and anyone can go up next. So, were there any moments of personal doubt or uncertainty along your journey? Or did you receive any pushback or skepticism from others when pursuing your career path? And how did you handle that? So I'll give you a couple seconds if anybody wants to go. So I know this is a two-parter. So were there any moments of personal doubt or uncertainty along your journey, or did you receive any pushback or skepticism from others when pursuing your career path? And how did you handle it?
I'll tell it just a really short story because it's very mud related. When I was in graduate school, like most people who go to graduate school, I had some pretty miserable times and was feeling pretty unsure of myself. And when I got there, I really thought I wanted to be a theoretical physicist. I was very excited about that, and I was having a really tough time. And I called Tom Donnelly on the phone to talk to him because he had been my advisor at Mudd, and he was someone that I really trusted. And, Tom gave me the advice he'd given to me as an undergrad, but I'd ignored it. And he said, Paul, the world only needs about 10 theoretical physicists, and you don't have to be one of them. And he's, encouraged me to think more about going into experimental physics and, thinking about my options, and just kind of walked me off the ledge, and gave me some really positive feedback and encouragement that made a huge difference in my life. It really sort of kept me from, dropping off graduate school that day, I would say. And, although I eventually ended up, leaving physics, it was certainly the kind of encouragement that I needed to kind of stick with the program and finish it on a high note, which was something that I'm still proud of, that I was able to do that. So just another example of, these connections at Mudd and how they really are going to last you a lifetime.
I have something. So in March of 2020, when something happened to the whole world, um, I had until then mostly tutored in person by driving to people's houses, and so that was going to be not possible for a little while, and that was very scary. And so what did I do? I don't really have a solution for the scary part. Sometimes things that are new that you haven't experienced before are just absolutely terrifying. But what I did for the actually like continuing to survive in a career is that I started telling a lot of my families about how I would tutor some college students at a distance. If you see this right here, it's a desk camera, or it's a mount, so I can show people what's on my desk. And I wrote up some documentation to make it look really official, to announce that I would be lending out similar equipment to get people started. And I was really scared because I didn't know whether people were going to accept that. There's like, oh, David's just trying to like get off easy by not showing up in our house. And but I stuck to it. They were generally okay with it, and as a result, I was able to basically, for most of the students, just pick up and keep tutoring as though I were in their house without an interruption, even in the middle of March of 2020. Yeah, so the answer is I don't have a good solution for making the new things not scary. They just kind of are.
Thank you, David. Tessa?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when I lost my job at Laserfiche, because I'd been there for almost 10 years, and because it totally like blindsided me, that was really hard, and I definitely sent me for a little spin of like, okay, I thought I was good at this. Am I really good at this? How did I miss something so big? And you know, it was really, there was a lot of doubt, I think, which is natural when you have such a big rejection like that. And I think what really helped me was just being like, all right, we're going on a coffee date. you. We're going on a coffee date. Ex-coworkers, people that I liked, and like talking to them about, um, what they see as my strengths, getting a little validation, but also just a little bit of like guidance, and also hearing their stories. Some of them had lost jobs before and been through a similar experience, and just learning how they came back from that, and also just hearing validation from them of like, no, you're good at your job. Right, like things happen. um and just I also had a lot of coworkers, sort of, even ones that I barely talked to, like ex-coworkers, come out of the woodwork and say like, hey, like, you'll really be missed. Like, you were my favorite, whatever, to work with. Um and that was really flattering, even though it was sad. But it helped me sort of get the ego that I needed, because you can't go into a job search without an inflated ego. Like, you just have to inflate your ego, because you have to talk like you're the shit. So um it took a lot, but I sort of leaned on my friends and community, and they helped sort of pump me up so that I could go into interviews being like, yes, I'm a genius. Uh, yeah.
We do tell our students to do the superwoman, superman stance, where they, before an interview, you just stand like, I am capable, I can do this, I'm confident. And I've seen, many presentations where they say that, and students feel more confident. So that's a good one. That's a good one, Tessa. Thank you. Thank you. All right, here's our next question, and that I can start us off with Paul. So how do you seek out or create opportunities for growth in your career?
That's a good question. I think the answer is always going to depend on exactly what size company in particular you're at, and what I'm at a fairly large company. I mean, there's like 5,000 employees. So there's some amount of structure in terms of the org chart or whatever. Like, there's, 7 people above me or whatever on the org chart, counting the CEO, which can be a really like very unusual situation for people who are used to like grad school or whatever, where it's very flat, the type of structure. So, my company has some amount of structure, but I'm fortunate enough that at where I am, I'm able to sort of just kind of take leadership opportunities as they're presented, and kind of find them where they need to be. I think that's kind of when you're, earlier in your career, you're more kind of at the direction of other people, and you're sort of judged by how well you are kind of meeting the needs that people are asking of you. And then as you get a little bit higher, you're more judged by how well you are meeting needs that other people aren't predicting. And that's kind of where you make this sort of transition in your career. And I think that's kind of like the critical step to sort of making your own career growth. Obviously, it's not perfect. Every company, you're always going to have issues where maybe you can't grow past a certain point. You're going to have challenges, but as a general rule, just finding those opportunities where you can sort of grow into an opportunity by volunteering, by taking on something just without being asked, is really the best tools.
Thank you, Paul. Tessa, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I feel like, in terms of creating opportunities for growth, like, I feel like I'm right in the middle between sort of 2 phases, as someone who's like mid-career, who's been in the industry like 10, 11 years. Whereas I think like early in my career, essentially what I did, and what I think worked really well for me for a while, was, hey, that seems like it could be better. Let me try to fix it. Or, hey, that looks good. Let me try to fix it. Right? It works especially in a smaller org or a growing org. And um, like, thankfully at the time I had a boss who would really empower me to do things like that. And so like, I think early on, especially when I was learning, just like jumping in and being like, this could be better. Let me try it. Who's going to stop me? Right? Like, there's very few people who can stop you. If IT can stop you, they probably should be doing it programmatically anyway. So if you do something, within reason, within common sense, there's a lot that you could do on your own, and just like trying stuff, and being willing to just like go outside what is your just direct lane. Like, I found that staying in my lane, it didn't make me happy, and it also wasn't super useful when I was early career. Now, I think I'm in this transition right now, and part of this is having transitions from a smaller company to a bigger company, where I'm having to put the brakes on that, partly for my own sanity, because I'm the kind of person who will really try and fix everything. So I see like, oh, well, this process is inefficient. And even though it's like 2 teams away, like, I just want to fix it. Like, oh, guys, did you know you could just automate this if you do this, right? Or like, hey, did you know you could be using this tool better? I'm really tempted to do that. But I think as I advance in my career, as I like have more responsibilities, like I have to stay sane and I can't bite off more than I can chew. And so like as I sort of have transitioned a little bit more into higher roles, I'm having to pay more attention to, okay, what is my boss measuring? And some days when I'm super overwhelmed, I have to take myself back and say, like, okay, this is depressing because I really want to help that one admin assistant over here. But like, it's just not my job. And I just have to be like, all right, if I don't have time, what does my boss care about? It's probably not that. Even if I think it should be, even if I want it to be, like, I have to sort of back myself out a little bit. And so I think the more I get into later in my career, I have to pay more attention to like protecting my boundaries and like understanding what does my boss care about? What does my boss's boss care about? What questions is my boss's boss asking them? Because that's what they're going to want to make sure they have an answer to. Paying a little bit more attention to that politics. It's a little icky, but I'm learning it, and it's becoming less annoying, I think, over time as I'm learning it.
Thank you, Tessa. David.
Yes. Oh, I think there seems to be a theme of looking for problems to solve. So that works for me too in the tutoring world. When I came back to New Jersey, it was about 2012 or so. And soon after that, in 2015, the College Board released a new version of their algebra-based AP physics exams. And so maybe those of us who are here are used to something called AP Physics B and AP Physics C. So now they have this thing called AP Physics 1 and AP Physics 2 for the algebra-based stuff. And a big difference in the way they do the testing is that they required a lot of written explanations, not just plug and chug and some algebra comes out. So I was noticing that that was really hard to teach. A lot of students were having a great difficulty with that. So I wanted to figure out what to do about that. And I talked to one of my friends from graduate school at Princeton, who was a lecturer there, and she told me about physics education research and how they use pictures um, and diagrams of physics quantities and then math to analyze problems. And I took that and I turned it into a little mnemonic memory tool for how to do the steps of physics problem solving. And I shared that with someone who's actually pretty high up in the AP Physics 1 program at that time. And then that turned into, skip a few steps, a column article in the Physics Teacher. So that was helpful for growing my career because now anytime someone asks, oh, do you tutor physics or something like that, I can always say, go to my homepage and download my copy of this journal article that I wrote for teaching people how to solve physics specifically for AP Physics 1 and 2.
Thank you, David. All right. So we're dwindling down. I know I want to be conscious because I know that there are some questions in the chat and then there were some pre-submitted questions. So do you ever consider changing to different types of roles or industries? Anybody can go. So if you've ever considered.
I can jump on this. So it's definitely something I think about. I try to think about it in context of what the job market looks like, trying to be a little bit more practical, especially these days. There's nothing like losing your job that'll make you shift to financial practicality very quickly. Um, but I think so right now, I want to stay where I am because I really value stability. Um, but I think a lot about potentially transitioning into like public sector, like civic technology, because something I'm really passionate about is, and something that I learned at my first job is really taking things that are inefficient and making them efficient. And I'm not talking about AI. I'm talking about like 10 steps back, like things that like your local government is doing that are just like incredibly paper based, right? Or just like things that people are having to do that's super manual and repetitive. Like there's a lot of areas and programs that we rely on that are like that feel like sort of Stone Age for us. But there's reasons that they're there, and some of them are regulations, and some of them are just sanity and budget and things like that. So I think a lot about potentially transitioning to like civic tech at some point in my life, and so I've started like tuning into a lot of like newsletters and just like following people who are in that space and started getting to feel for the space and understanding what that looks like.
Thank you, Tessa.
Yes. So in the New Jersey Gay Men's Chorus, I help people get set up with FarPlay and I teach them their notes and things like that. So I like it and I would like to keep doing more of that. So yes, I am considering doing choir coaching or things like that. The stage I'm at right here includes two things: having enough courage to go buy a domain name, and then the second thing is sitting here being scared for a while, and I will need to process that and then hopefully that will turn into part of a career. But yeah, that's where I am.
That's awesome, David. So what instruments do you play?
Oh, okay. So I sing baritone-ish voice,
Nice.
and I play piano poorly in the sense of I have those 2 years of piano lessons from middle school that are very typical for people who grew up in suburban Silicon Valley.
Oh, that is very cool.
Whole neighborhoods like that.
That is so cool. I'm a music fan, so I need to connect with you later. So,
Okay.
Paul, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely still harbor some thoughts of like going back to academia. Not so much the research aspect, but the teaching aspect. I've always enjoyed teaching, mentoring. I loved doing teaching assistant during grad school. It's something I definitely have a knack for, but I still trying to figure out how to make it work in terms of finances and all that. So it's kind of more of a fantasy at this point. I feel pretty comfortable, I would say, working in biotech, working in systems engineering, in related fields. So.
Thank you so much, Paul, David, Tessa. I truly appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you a question. With the knowledge and experience you have now, what advice would you tell your younger self? Would you change anything about your time at MUD or the first years of your career? So I'm going to leave it open so whoever wants to tackle this one.
I can start with this one. So, and this may be a little bit depressing, but I want to be real. I want to be real about it. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat things. I think the thing I would say to like myself at MUD would be like, you're never gonna be stupider than you are right now. And I mean that in two ways. One is that being at MUD makes you feel stupid, and I think we've probably all experienced this, except for maybe a very lucky few. But I would also say that like on a physical level, being sleep deprived, being in that environment for most people doesn't work very well, and the impact that it has, that's significant, like long-term stress and sleep debt. Like some stress is good, but my experience is that the MUD stress was beyond the sort of learning zone stress a lot of the time. And that combined with the sleep deprivation, that combined with being in your late teens, early 20s, like messes up your brain and can be traumatizing and can be really hard. And so I realized after I left MUD I realized that I actually was smart, but it took leaving MUD because there's so much that puts you at a disadvantage about being at MUD and especially about being sleep deprived. Like it's so easy to underestimate, especially when it's a long-term thing, just the impact of that stuff. So I think I would just like I don't have the solution for it, but I would just say like you're not as broken as you might feel because I think MUD makes you feel a little bit like broken and can make you sometimes feel and I don't know, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think for a lot of people I've talked to, like it can make it feel like I can't do anything anymore, like everything I used to be good at is gone. Um but I found that like it takes a year or two, but once you start to sort of heal and get enough sleep and all those things, then turns out a lot of things that felt impossible were actually aren't as hard anymore.
Thank you so much, Tessa. David.
Yes. Okay, so don't freak out. Well, if you do, it's okay. Don't freak out about freaking out. And then it's okay to let the grades slide a little bit if you can sleep a little bit more and be a bit more conscious of uh and like consciously aware of what you are thinking so that you're actually thinking. Um Pushing a little bit harder just to push the GPA up a little bit more is not really necessary and not necessarily helpful if you're just walking around like a zombie and not like there. I prepared part of that before Tess said their announcement. It's really independent, but the fact that it's independent says something. And the other thing is, yes, it's easy to get really burnt out. If you're really tired at the end of your time at Mud and you're considering doing something like graduate school, please feel completely free to entertain the possibility of taking a gap year to just like zone out a little bit. Uh, yeah, otherwise it can be. I went directly to grad school, and maybe I shouldn't have done that because it was just very. It doesn't feel necessarily good to jump into existential dread right at that moment. So
Thank,
consider a gap year. There, that sounds better.
thank you, David. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly Mud was a lot of highs and lows. You know, everyone has some ambivalence about their time there. It was very difficult. I mean, grad school was, you know, academically was easy compared to Mud. I mean, in terms of like the amount of homework and stuff. So it's you know, it really is a challenging environment that you know, really shapes us in a lot of different ways. I mean, I you know, if I could go back and change something, I mean, I wouldn't change anything in my life. You know, I feel very happy about. I have two beautiful children that I, you know, but you know, in this environment, I wish I had paid a little bit more attention in biology 52. I wish I had been a little bit more open to the idea of like looking at other possibilities. I felt very monomaniacal about like I was going to be a professor. This is something I wanted to do, and it really gave me tunnel vision about some other things and topics and interests. And you know, there's just so much to do and so many things to see, you know, in college and at Mud and you know, around and you know, academically and not academically. And I look back and I kind of wish I had been a little bit more open to new experiences and you know, different things, and a little bit less kind of focused on just one goal.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your questions. I mean, your answers. I'm sorry. Vanessa has the next question.
I do. So, do you have any advice on how to find places that are actually looking for recent graduates to hire?
Mm. That I think is sometimes a matter of it's gonna be connections because unfortunately it's really crappy. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's really crappy that a lot of companies will leave job postings up when they're not really hiring for them, or they will say entry level when they're not entry level. Um, Super common. I could try and guess why, but really I don't know. It's over my pay grade of figuring out why those things happen, and it's a battle that I've decided to keep myself from trying to fight everywhere that I work. Um, but it's, I mean, I mean, I feel like a huge part of the reason that I got an entry level job when I did was just the company had a history of hiring mutters, and so I had a huge leg up. Is that fair? Absolutely not. Um, but just finding something you have in common with people there, and also reaching out to people there and saying like, "Hey, I saw this job posting. Do you know if that's real?" Before you waste your time, because it takes a long time to put a app together and cover letter and stuff, especially if you're doing it for the first time and trying to figure it out. Like, it really doesn't hurt to be like, "Hey, like, do find somebody on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, I'm really interested in this. Like, here's random thing I found that we have in common, however tenuous it is, that I found stalking people on LinkedIn. You know, it's can you tell me more about this role, or like if my role makes sense." I wish I had better advice. It's rough out there.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, don't be afraid to stalk people on LinkedIn. Send messages. Is that your friend's cousin's barber? Send them a message. There's no like downside to like just reaching out to someone who might be a potential contact. One other thing I would say is like that I certainly wasn't aware of was internships, which is often a way that large companies hire people directly out of college. I was like utterly shocked to find out that like at my company, our internship program starts, like the application starts in September and ends in early October for the next summer. So you have to really have your stuff together in order to apply for an internship for like, the following year. And this is like really apparently very common with large companies, and something that I always kind of tell people like you got to plan ahead. If it's something you particularly with these internships, which are kind of the number one way that big companies do hire people fresh out of college or out of grad school, you got to start looking very, very early, and casting a wide net. And the other piece of advice I'll say is that like looking for a job is a skill. It's a thing that you like actively have to try. I think we all kind of come out of mud thinking like, oh my God, like I just went through this incredible, like I'm at least somewhat of a badass, like having made it through here. Like people are going to be interested in my amazing resume. And it's like, no, they aren't. You really have to make your resume look like special and magical, and don't fall into the trap of like just thinking, oh, I'll just put it on the resume and then they'll sort it out. Like make your resume look like the job description. Highlight the skills that you have that are exactly the ones that they're looking for. Stretch the experiences a little bit. Make it. You have to sell yourself, and like making a new resume, like or rejiggering your resume for each role that you apply for to try to highlight how you're the perfect fit for that resume. It's no fun, but it's what you have to do. And that's really like the number one thing. If I'm looking at a whole bunch of resumes for a position and I see people who basically just send in like their CV, it's like you just kind of set it aside. It's not like this person doesn't, understand how industry works. And that's like one of the things I think people are really going to be looking for, because it's sort of a sign that you're like, I'm willing to learn. I know applying for a job is stupid, and making your resume look nice is kind of dumb, but it shows a willingness to like kind of play the game, and it shows that you're going to, be effective or more effective when you get there. So that would be my general advice.
I'm not sure how to do this in industry because I never went there. But in terms of trying to find a job or a position close to graduation, there are two things I can think of. Um, so there was a student from a year above me in physics, and I think they were having problems with their graduate applications. So it's going to sound stupid once I explain what the solution is. So they went to a professor at one of the professors at Mud and let them know, and then the professor at Mud knew how, I guess, dire the situation was, picked up the phone, called one of their connections at one of the universities and helped establish a connection. So one thing is possibly ask one of the professors, especially if you've not quite graduated yet, can you suggest some connection I can make? They might be able to make the connection for you. And then the same thing with other students and classmates. So this isn't really a solution right now, but based on this question, it occurs to me that maybe the tutors who are alumni from MUD, maybe we should all get together and form a network so we can give word of mouth referrals to each other. Because in our industry, you don't like really apply with a resume that you submit to someone to review. A lot of the business comes through, oh yeah, someone's mom was looking for a chemistry tutor. Are you available, like that? And it's really just like, can you get a referral from someone else who's already tutoring? So that would be my response.
Great, thank you, everyone. So our last question for the night, what is your advice on getting quickly ramped up on a subject area in a new job? What has worked well or not for you?
Ugh. I have sort of a philosophy on that, which is that it's hard to get people to tell you what to do sometimes, especially if they probably hired you because they're at least to some extent help you, they want you to be able to figure it out or to help teach them. But it's actually really easy to get people to correct you. So my philosophy on this, which usually works pretty well for me, is just go to someone and say, so I'm gonna do this. What am I doing wrong? Or, hey, I was thinking I was gonna approach it this way. And it's much, much easier, I think, for people to find. It's much easier for people to find, oh, actually that part's not gonna work. Or, oh, based on my knowledge of being at this company, this part's gonna be, that part's not gonna work. But like I very much have been like a sort of dive right in and let someone else tell me if I break stuff. Um, Partly because I've worked in places where if I do something wrong, nobody's gonna die, right? Like I wouldn't give this advice in certain industries, but in a lot of cases, right? Like within the like I mentioned earlier, in terms of like if you just try stuff, and if like if I for me, I just try automating stuff, and if it's not allowed, then IT probably should have blocked me or trained me not to do it. Uh, right? Like within reason, within common sense. So I just try stuff and let people correct me, especially when it comes to like internal processes, and assuming there's reasonable stuff in place. Like I'm not just like, oh, let's just push some code to production and try. But when I'm talking about like, oh, let's just go and talk to this person, and if that was a little bit of a faux pas, like I'm new, do all that stuff while you're new, because they'll judge you later, but they won't judge you in your first 6 months. You got to do all that. You just got to try everything and let everybody correct you. That's been my approach.
I would say in my field, I sort of had this, I went into, being a systems engineer for a biotech company, and I had no background in engineering or biology. So it was a lot of learning curve to, understand. I mean, the suggestions are kind of obvious. It's like I just kept a OneNote open at every meeting I went to, where anytime I heard a word I didn't understand, I would just put it on the OneNote. And then when I got to my desk later, I would go Google it and try to understand and start reading things. One really nice thing about I'm sort of a big, like, I like to work in the office. I work from home occasionally, but since everyone's back from COVID, I'm really more in the office almost 4 or 5 days a week usually. And one thing I really like about it is I can just kind of like bug people about things in the break room, in the hallway. I learned so much about what's going on in other areas, or about new things I don't understand, or, and there's plenty of things I don't understand, just by like kind of having the guts to just kind of say, hey, I don't understand this problem. Can you explain it to me? And I'm very fortunate that the company I work at has a very open culture where people are very willing to, just kind of set people aside and say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's why I'm unhappy about this, or here's this issue that we're having that, we don't have a solution for. And, I think that's, it sounds like the world's like dumbest advice, but just ask people if you don't know what they're talking about, is something that has worked really well for me in my career, and has really allowed me to learn an awful lot in my 8 years here that I just never would have expected to know.
Okay, so I have two suggestions. One of them is, it's like the talking to people thing. Feel free to find someone and bring them to a chalkboard or a whiteboard and just draw things out. Feel free to find someone and bring them to a gigantic conference room table, get a bunch of little pieces of paper, cut them up into little index card size things, or get a bunch of index cards, write things on them and move them around on the table so they make different stories and sentences that you can talk about. Like, if I put these two cards like this and it says this, is that okay? Okay, so that you can do that in a place where you're actually working with some colleague. For me, because I do a lot of stuff where I'm supposed to teach someone something, if I need to learn something new, here is something that works. It's very painful. So you take the math, physics, whatever book out, and then you take every phrase and you read it, and then you turn it into a part of a picture. And ideally, at the end of this, all the knowledge should have been put into a compressed précis in a graphical form that's like a couple pages of the book turned into a 2-page illustrated tabloid spread. And a litmus test for did I actually read this and actually understand the stuff that I have to teach tonight to the student is it, can you, like, with auditable accuracy, paperwork accuracy, say for sure that every little piece of semantic content inside those 5 pages of the textbook corresponds to some graphical feature on your poster. That's a good litmus for test for testing. Is it just like, oh, I kind of ran my eyes across the text and I think I got it, versus like I actually know it. So that's something you can do when you don't have someone else to talk to. It is very painful.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so Tessa, David, and Paul, we want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and the audience. We truly appreciate you taking the time to tell us about your journey and other experiences. This recording will be uploaded to the Harvey Mudd College's Career Services playlist on YouTube, available for all our community members to view. Again, thank you so much. We so appreciate you all.
And thank
Thank
you to our audience for your questions and for attending this event. We will follow up within the next week with the recorded video. If you are interested in sharing your journey with alumni and current students, please contact us at alumni@hmc.edu. All future events can be found on our website, alumni.hmc.edu. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next time.